You're listening to Journey for Truth with internationally known medium, Tai Yi practitioner, and radio host Tami Urbanic.
Hello and welcome to Journey for Truth Radio on iHeartRadio and YouTube. I'm Tami Urbanic. Thank you so much for joining me. Journey for Truth Radio is always on demand and with many new episodes. On my website, empowermentthroughhealing.org, you'll see a treatment titled Internal Conflict. This particular treatment is to help treat illnesses and diseases that are essentially happening in the torso area of the body. Now, this can include cancer, which can be occurring in any area of the body. But this treatment helps begin removing toxins that the illness is creating, and it can also be utilized to aid in the assistance you might be receiving from your medical doctor or some other alternative health practitioner. So internal conflict, it's also more described on my website, empowermentthroughhealing.org. On JonahLifeInstitute.com, you can see a new Jonah message titled Toxic. And this downloadable message describes not just toxic food and water, but also toxic people, toxic situations, and how we can move out of that to create a much less toxic life and enjoy our lives. My guest this week is Judy Logan. Judy worked in the Department of Psychiatry in a community hospital and saw the effects of domestic violence. Her passion is in spreading awareness about domestic violence, and she also has a book that we're going to talk about. Judy, welcome.
Thank you very much, Tami. I appreciate you having me on the show.
It's wonderful having you here. Domestic violence is certainly a topic that needs to be continued talking about. I know others talk about it, but we need to continue really spreading that awareness. So what is your main purpose in talking about domestic violence?
Well, I think particularly today, and I mean 2016, we're still confronted with very high-profile cases of domestic violence or simply violence against women. Mm-hmm. And I think because of that, a whole lot hasn't changed since I worked in the community hospital. There, that was the late 80s, middle 90s, through the middle 90s. There were a lot of women coming in from homes that were toxic, that were battering situations, and of course there were children that were involved in that. Today we see that continuing, although the laws have been changed, and things like Violence Against Women Act is helping to ameliorate some of that, turn the other way and just don't get involved in family affairs.
Right.
But when I see what's happening in the political arena, all of the back and forth and the accusations, and someone said to me the other day, "Don't you think it's odd that everybody's coming out of the woodwork?" I said, well, I'll tell you, this is a much easier time to come out of the woodwork and say, I've been battered in my home, or my spouse or my date or whatever has been abusive to me, because at least they're not always going to blame the women. At one time, it was the woman's fault. And I've always heard women told in church and in synagogue, if you were making a nice marriage, this wouldn't happen. Go home and be good. Go home and do your job.
Exactly.
So from the highest levels to the family unit, it's rampant. It's still rampant.
Well, even just looking at how women are spoken about in the media right now with the whole Donald Trump situation, which, unless you're living under a rock, you've heard about the situation going on there.
Exactly.
And how people are responding to the women coming out with their accusations. Now, it is interesting that the timing that they've chosen to come out, needs to be questioned for sure. But
Absolutely.
It's so important that when a woman comes out and says, I was sexually assaulted or I was sexually harassed, that she's not immediately shut down.
Yeah, exactly.
There are those situations where people lie. Yes, there's always those situations where a woman lies, a man lies about a particular situation, but to immediately shut them down or to degrade them or to insult them, call them names, is just, it's outrageous, completely outrageous.
It is outrageous. And, you mentioned Mr. Trump. I don't want to get into political things, but I did talk to a woman who was campaigning for Hillary Clinton, and she was making phone calls or whatever it is they do. And she got a woman on the phone. The woman said, I would never vote for Hillary. And the poll worker said, well, why not? And she said, because her husband was a tramp and ran around and did this and this. And my friend said, well, she's an acquaintance. She said, wait a minute, wasn't Hillary sinned against, if you will? I mean, wasn't his adultery his problem? Mm-hmm. How did it become her problem? And why would we victimize her twice? Why would we say, I know what's better for you in your marriage. You should have thrown the bum out. You should have left him. How do I know what someone should do in their marriage? What we can do is we can educate them and say, if this becomes intolerable, or if it becomes physical, or any of those other safety issues, we'll teach you how to get away. But I do not want to second victimize a woman, just as you're saying, because she's having a battering relationship or she's been violated in some way. I'm not going to add to that, and it's wrong.
Exactly. I've heard that same argument online, different comments and different articles, and I don't understand that logic. But yes, not getting into politics too much, but it is a great example of really questioning our logic, but also in when we hear about women who have been sexually assaulted, how they're blamed for it. And I think you were alluding to this a moment ago. You should have worn different clothing. You shouldn't have been out that late. It's in some situations people are wanting to blame the female, that she somehow caused it. It's all her fault. There's always a level of taking responsibility, of course, but there needs to be just as much responsibility on the perpetrator every single time.
Yep, exactly. And, you talked about why others, I won't just say women, but it's often women that denigrate other women when this happens. Part of it is the victim mentality. I don't want to be too close to that victim because it might happen to me.
Interesting.
Number one. Number two, I don't know how to help her. Number three, what if her husband tells my husband and they both get mad and then I'm in trouble because of what she's going through? I can't get involved. No.
Yeah.
There's a fabulous feminist book by women of color, and that's exactly the title, and it's called This Bridge Called My Back. And one of the Hispanic ladies in the book talks about she has more to suffer through and worry from the other women in her community wanting her to keep her place within the machismo environment than she ever gets from her husband, father, or brothers. It's the women that want to maintain the status quo because they don't have a lot of resources to be able to go out. We were trained, if you get a man, I've got to fight you for him because I might not get one.
Exactly. Is that conditioning? Is that social conditioning?
Exactly. Yep. So it's pervasive. We have to do something. And you mentioned the perpetrators. When I first came out to Vegas, I live in Vegas now. When I first came out to Vegas, I volunteered at Safe Nest, which is a very wonderful shelter out here. They put you through excruciating training. When I say excruciating, you've seen these videos. You're meeting these women. They have burn marks on their bodies and broken faces that were never put back together. And we had 50 hours of training before we could even go to the shelter, which is secret. And once you get there, it's even worse. I mean, you see the most god-awful stuff. And I can remember saying, how can this happen? How can someone say they love you and then punch you in the face or burn you?
Right.
What is up with that? It just boggled my mind. And unfortunately, I was still working full-time at that point. So I only lasted about 6 months. And then I said, I can't do this. It was different working in psych because you knew those women and children were getting the resources they needed and maybe some training. But there were so limited resources to re-educate women and to help them understand, why are you in that situation?
Exactly.
How will I get you out? Most of the shelters do their very best, but how many beds do they have? How long can they keep you? Maximum 8 weeks? You've got to have a dynamite social worker that can get you housing, get you financing. I mean, I'll give you an example. When I do a book presentation, people say, why do these people stay? I have a little stuffed animal. It's a centipede. And I tell the joke, quote unquote, about a man who's lonely, so he goes to the pet store and says, I want an exotic pet. Long story short, the pet owner says, why don't you get a centipede? They're wonderful. Guy says, okay, brings it home, builds it a house. He goes to work. That night he comes home, he goes, centipedes, you want to go out for a beer? No answer. Centipede, you want to go out for a beer or not? The centipede says, hold your horses, I'm putting on my shoes. If you're in a battered relationship and it's just you, how many legs do you have to run on? If you have one child, how many legs are you running on? You have 2 children, you have 3, 4. How fast can you run on 10 legs? Especially when getting out is the most dangerous time. You can't run quickly.
Right. And I agree with you with the many different shelters that help women. And as far as I know, I don't think there are shelters for men who are abused. And there
are some starting up. There are some.
Okay, good.
More, because this is interesting. We always assume women are the only victims. There are 1 in 4 victims in America. Men are 1 in 6.
Wow.
And that's adult men. And one of the things that hasn't been examined yet, which I think I'm going to do in another book, is the whole domestic violence within homosexual relationships, lesbian relationships, elder people who live together for economic security. They may not be related or relating sexually, but the other dimensions of people. Now, those are adult men, 1 in 6. Think about all those mothers, 1 in 4, who have little boys. There were shelters back in the 80s that would not take a woman if she had teenage boys.
Yeah.
Because the shelters,
I think the shelters here. I think the shelters here. Also, I think the age there is an age limit in which if you have a son, you can't go, which is
so
devastating.
What do you do?
Yeah, exactly.
You leave him home with the abuser? I mean, that's like Sophie's Choice, God forbid.
Right.
How do you make that choice?
So the shelters, they, like you stated, they do their best. They have so many beds. And for the majority, it is survival. They're going to house you in secret. They're going to feed you. They're going to give you a few resources. But it's in terms of that education.
Right.
And understanding how that situation was created.
Right,
how
exactly.
you were drawn into that particular type of relationship, that education needs to occur so that you don't just go out and you find another abusive situation. And I think that is so powerful and strong. Now, you worked in a community hospital, and that's where you stated you saw a lot of domestic violence victims. What did you observe there? When I think of community hospital, I think of people being treated for injuries. Is that what you mean?
Well, we had a community hospital, interestingly enough, that had 9 psychiatric units.
Wow.
5 of them were inpatient. I mean, we had everything from addictions treatment to a locked adolescent unit, a locked children's unit, and that wasn't necessarily to keep them in, it was to keep the perps out. We had an adult unit, we had a psych testing for, learning disabilities and all that, and then the regular gambit of psychotherapy. Well, the units were filled with women who had been broken, beaten, starved, whose pets had been murdered as a way of blackmail, whose children had also had cigarettes put out on their bodies. I mean, if someone's holding your child hostage and has a bat over his head or her head, what are you going to do? You're going to do anything it takes to stop that. And I don't think the women have the mentality that, I'm going to kill you. And that's maybe a better response than, oh my God, what do I do? Which is what happens. Women are not empowered to be their own advocates. They get into these relationships because they have zero self-worth. Now, suppose, and there are a lot of women who have good self-worth who get into these relationships, but think of this visual. If you had $10 in your hand, and you marry someone and you think, man or woman, doesn't matter, and you think, oh, they're wonderful, they love me, and then after a month or so, your spouse says, you know what, you're ugly, I hate that long hair. You've got split ends, why don't you cut it? You look, I don't want to be seen with you in public. He or she takes $1 out of those 10. The next time it's like, you suck in bed, you can't make love to save your soul. Takes another $1. Again, the clothing, your friends, your schooling, oh, this meal is horrible, throws it in your face, takes your last remaining $1. What currency, emotionally, psychologically, economically, what do you have left to get out with? Zero.
Yeah.
Zero. And if you're predisposed to have any insecurity, which of course women are, we're trained that way, always, deflect. My mother was a very strong woman, And yet her generation, she would have been 99 this year, her generation acquiesced to everything their husbands wanted. If the husband said, you're not going out, they didn't go out. You're not going to have friends, you didn't have friends. They were battered and abused and didn't even know it. Their relationships were not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
They might not have been punched, but it was not healthy. Yep.
Now, many want to hate the abuser.
Right.
You know, when we hear about a woman being abused, they want to go beat on the abuser.
Right.
What can we learn here in understanding why a person would choose to abuse his wife, his male partner, his children, or a woman choosing to abuse her husband or her female partner?
Right, exactly. I'm not a psychotherapist. My master's is in education, but from what I've seen and what I've read in the psychiatric literature, impulse control is one of the biggest problems that people have who have anger issues. And there was a video on YouTube the other day where there was a man and woman getting married, and he gave her cake and she took it off the fork, and then she gave him cake and kept teasing him, pulling it back and forth. Finally, he went like this and knocked the fork out of her hand. And underneath, everybody's saying, run, get out of there, don't, get an annulment. Because that impulse control, for whatever combination of reasons, he was either humiliated, angered, embarrassed, or just pissed. He had to lash out at her. So it's often impulse control. It's also nurture. It's what you see. Sometimes it's biological. If you have a mood disorder or you're schizophrenic or, again, your character disorder, there are all kinds of physiological things that can be helped with chemicals, can helped with, psychotropic drugs, that sort of thing. I'm really out of my league talking about the psychiatry of it, but people get into it for another reason that we can talk about. I have a script I cast for players in my life. Like, for me, I wanted to marry somebody very big, very strong, very, macho, very handsome, and I did. He was gorgeous. I was prejudiced. But he died. And we would have been married 50 years this year, but he passed away 12 years ago. But that was all right. So I had a script of what I wanted. And I wanted someone who wasn't going to compete with me for talk time. So when we first got married, I got him a key ring that says, I have nothing to say, and don't make me say it twice. He was a strong, silent type. Now, what if he was also a bully?
Right.
What if he was also nasty? He was 250 pounds. He could have squished me like a grape, popped me like a pimple. But luckily he didn't. What if he had? What do you do with someone that's overpowering you? If your script says you should be battered, or you should be dismissed, or you should be denigrated, for whatever combination of reasons, you're going to cast for that person.
Exactly. And you chose, and it's not just luck, but you chose that relationship knowing on some level that he was not going to bully you.
Exactly.
Most women, if not all women, do not enter into a relationship hoping to be abused, hoping to be controlled. They usually enter into a relationship wanting to be taken care of. They want to feel secure. And that's not bad or wrong, but it then leads you to give your power away to someone versus wanting to enter into a relationship where you're an equal, where you're compatible, where this person's personality complements your personality and you can be on the same journey together. That's where I see a healthy relationship. But, the word bully, that's a perfect word here, that some people grow up to be bullies because they were bullied. And the point of my question was trying to guide people to look at, yes, we can look at an abuser and we can say this person has really, really hurt another person or people, and there need to be consequences for that on some level. But also, can we have compassion for this person who's in so much pain, he has to inflict pain on others? What happened to him in childhood? Did his mother beat him? Did his father beat him? Can we have compassion for what he or she experienced instead of adding on to more hate, adding on to more anger? Is, I think an important point for people to look at.
Absolutely. And I think what you just made me think about is that when you're dealing with any kind of behavior that's not okay with you, for whatever combination of reasons, and you can't unweave a textile to find out why everything is. You deal with the what. This is unacceptable. Mm-hmm. Why? I don't care. This is unacceptable. I want it stopped. If it won't stop, I'm gone. Maybe you can't say I'm gone. You plan secretly to get out. Yeah. Then you try to facilitate, if there is a compromise or if there is openness, you try to deal with the why. But that's better handled by the professionals, by those who are trained in psychiatry, psychology, yes, who can actually, and there are programs that are developing for the perpetrators. There is, in the Christian tradition, they say, hate the sin, but love the sinner. I prefer to say, hate the act, love the actor. Because I don't want to get the religious piece in there, because oftentimes people are assaulted into silence in their religions.
Yes.
It's like, go home, make nice, you don't, this religion doesn't allow divorce, and this one doesn't allow for women's rights. This one doesn't allow women to preach. I mean, there were so many constrictions. I think it was Marian Edelson Wright, the education person in Washington. She said, if girls can't see it, they can't be it. What role models have we seen of strong women who have come out of these circumstances and said, you can get away? Rihanna, one of the most, am I saying her name right? Rihanna, the songstress.
Rihanna?
Yes, Rihanna, thank you. I don't follow music, but anyway, she was battered. And then she went back to him. Yeah. I don't know how it is now, but I hope to God with her money, she finds some people with sense that says, you know what, you may love him to pieces, but look at his picture. Mm-hmm. Leave him outside the door.
Exactly.
You can't help him. You've got to help you.
Right.
And that's what it means to recover.
To make yourself the priority and to really heal and come to understand how that relationship was created, what attracted you into that type of relationship, so you don't keep recreating the same cycle again and again.
And recasting for the same script.
Exactly.
I met a woman in South Boston when we lived in Massachusetts, as we were all raised, my husband and me and all that. And she had a beautiful little 5-year-old, gorgeous little girl. And I think she was Hispanic. I forget what nationality. But anyway, beautiful little girl. And the mother's calling her the devil child. And I said, what? And she said, well, she's the devil's child. I said, at 5 years old? And she said, oh, yeah, she's just went into her stream of swears. And I said, do you know she's going to live up to that? What you say to her is what she's going to become. Because nobody wants to go against their mother. Yeah. So if the mother tells you you're a devil child, you're going to live up to that to please your mother.
That makes me sad.
My children, everything. I would kill for my children. Not just die, kill. But the point is, this woman was literally throwing away her child at 5 years old.
What did she say to you when you told her that?
I was appalled. I said, she's so gorgeous. She's so beautiful. She says, well, you live with her. I said, great. I've always wanted another daughter. I said, let me take her home. And of course, my daughter's over there going, Mama.
That is very sad for the little girl involved.
Terribly sad.
I understand that sometimes parents want to blame their children for their behavior. Right. But you have to look at, what did they observe? Yeah. Right upon birth. Children hear everything. They absorb everything.
Absolutely.
And, as soon as they have even their sight and they can sit up and they can see you and they can see you interacting with other people and they can feel your interaction with them, they're going to absorb all of that and start seeing that as the example and begin acting out in certain ways, unfortunately. And that makes me sad, but I know that happens. It's very sad.
Very sad.
Now let's talk about your book.
Oh, okay.
Your book, Shelter Me. What is this about?
It's about two women in crisis, of course. People ask me, do you ever write anything that's funny? No. Although I have published a few funny short stories. But my book is about two women in crisis. One is a recently widowed executive's wife, used to the high life, now has to get her first job at 55 with no job skills. And of course, she's grieving, she's angry, she's hostile. And the other woman is a young battered wife and mother who becomes her work supervisor. And the widow, Anne, as I say, she's grieving, and I've been through that. That's a club nobody wants to join. Mm-hmm. And then Terry, the battered woman, is the people pleaser. Oh, everything's genuflect. Let me take care of you. Oh, your hair's a mess. Let me fix it. She is so all over Anne to help her that Anne goes, what's up with this woman? What's her angle? Everybody has an angle. What is this? And they become friends in the strangest of ways in the novel. And when Terry and her children are violently expelled from their home because the husband gets violent and hurts one of the children, that's when Terry snaps up and says, I got to get out of here. And under very difficult circumstances, she manages to get away. And the only one that'll take her in is Anne, the widow. So from there, the widow, who had a very good love, very nice love, convinces Terry to start action to get her husband out of her life. But it's like taking gum out of your hair.
Yes.
You can use ice cubes, you can use a comb, you can cut it. There's always going to be residual gummy stuff in your hair. And, a couple of times she goes back to him, and until the very serious climatic end, people don't know if she's going to live or die.
Wow. That sounds like an amazing book, and I can't wait to read it. I've had it in my purse.
I certainly hope you do read it.
I can't wait to read it. That is awesome.
It's very graphic and very violent. And I think the blurb that I got on the back from Dr. Ethan Samuel Rothman, who is a psychiatrist at BU School of Medicine, he said this should be read by every professional who deals with battered wives and their families, and by anyone who has to be a friend or a partner or a family member of one.
Now, do you have one or two happy ending stories of women or men that you've heard who were abused and they were able to move on successfully?
Absolutely. Couple of them I can't talk about because they're in my family, but definitely there are some women that I'm still friends with today that had come through the hospital, way back in the 80s and 90s, and it was very difficult. You had to keep talking to them and talking to them and talking to them. You're okay. You're worth it. You're worth it. God doesn't make junk. You're okay. You can get away. A bad love's not better than no love. You're better off without love. Learn self-love. And finally, they said, oh, and other people said, why do you bother to keep talking to them? You must have told them that 19 times. And there's a famous story by John Wesley, about John Wesley, the man who created Methodist Protestant religion. His mother was teaching him things, and his father got angry. He said, why do you tell that stupid kid 19 times or 20 times? And she said, because if I only tell him 19, he won't get it. You have to reach the H in enough. Mm-hmm. ENOUGH. Every letter takes a building, and once you're at the H in enough, you'll make a move.
Yeah.
You have to stick in there with people. Don't go down the trap of, I've told her so many times, I'm sick of telling her, she doesn't want to change. No, she's got to unravel that tapestry. There are so many things that are involved.
So
her whole life.
So once you got to that 19, 20, 21 times, you started seeing change.
Absolutely. And the whole crux of it is you must not give up on them. Yeah. Must not give up on them. You can't. You're pulling a tiny fish in from a very turbulent ocean, and you want to get that fish on board and put her in a new bucket of water, or put him in a new bucket of water to save them until you get on shore and can put them in another pond.
Amazing. I love hearing about that. Now, where can people find your book and your information?
My book is available on all online sites, Goodreads, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I think it's on eBay, too. Somebody's selling my used books. But that's okay. It means they read them, I hope. But they're available on all those. And I have a website, judyshinelogan.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Judy, so much for being my guest today.
Thank you so much, Tami. You're doing great work, and I just bless you and hope it continues.
Thank you so much, and thank you, listeners, for joining me here as well on Journey for Truth on iHeartRadio and YouTube. Until next time, have a fantastic week.